Good afternoon to our CLA family members, clients, community partners, and friends. Welcome back to the live stream. And happy April Fool's Day, and my favorite, St. Louis Cardinals opening day today. We sincerely hope that during this time, all of you are staying safe and healthy. So we have two of my favorite people and topics on tap today. First, we'll have Melissa Labonte joining me in the presenter chair, where we will discuss some more details related to the deadline change, the COBRA issues with ARPA, and she's also going to cover President Biden's proposed infrastructure changes. So lots of cool stuff with the legislation to talk about with Melissa. Also, we have our very own Matthew Rittenbrin joining us with the latest PPP updates. So Melissa and Matthew, great to have you today.
Glad to be here.
Before we dive in today, we do have some housekeeping we want to cover. We have the ability, as always now, for live Q&A during our session today, but in order to participate, you must register and log in using the link below me. Questions will appear for you in the audience to see and like and move up in priority so that we can address them live. But we also have moderators standing by in the chat, and we've got a lot of them in there today, knowing the volume of questions that we're seeing, and they will interact with you live. We also want to let you know to look for our special events on our CLAconnect.com homepage, and register for webinars and things like that you'll actually see in the feed as well. In addition to webinars, be on the lookout for articles, white papers, and other items providing additional guidance for you. And as always, please reach out to your CLA relationship. We want to hear from you and talk to you. So let's just jump right into the April 15th deadline discussion with Melissa. Melissa, the IRS recently announced an extension of this deadline for individuals to May 17th. There were a lot of questions about what was and was not included. And then earlier this week, IRS followed up with Notice 2021-21 providing some of those details. Could you tell us about what's in this latest guidance?
Yes, we have some clarity now on a few issues. IRS has definitively said you have until May 17th to make IRA contributions, as well as contribute to HSAs, those health savings accounts. Also on the list would be the Archer medical savings accounts, as well as covered Ls. All those have the extended time until May 17th.
Excellent. So when you mentioned IRAs, is that both the regular and the Roth IRAs?
Yes, absolutely. Those contributions for both the regular IRA as well as the Roth IRA, again, can be made until May 17th without any type of form or anything at all. It's just automatically extended.
Well, that's helpful. Now, I know the other big issue that's on everybody's mind are the first quarter estimated tax payments for 2021. Was that addressed in the notice?
It was addressed, but they have been very, very clear that the additional time does not apply to the first quarter estimate. But most folks, they don't make first quarter estimates. They include the amount in their extension payment. And that's the question folks have been wondering. If you make an extension payment on May 17th and it has an overpayment, whether the overpayment will be treated as though it's made on April 15th. Unfortunately, IRS has not provided a direct answer. So if taxpayers want to be certain they don't want to have to pay any interest, you're going to have to make a separate first quarter estimated tax payment by April 15th.
Thanks. I know that's pretty helpful. And initially, now the relief only applied to the Form 1040 series and certain information returns, right? There's still no extension of the other returns like trust tax returns, gift returns, anything like that, correct?
That's right, Jen. Unlike last year, where it was very broad relief, this year the IRS is providing very narrow relief to individuals. And at this point, we do not think that's going to change. They're going to stick to their guns and keep those due dates as is. Looks like the only relief is going to be related to 1040s. And I should mention, this is more of a technical side. There are some information returns that also did get extended, but the major returns like the trust returns, the business returns, the gift tax returns, those have not and will not be extended.
Excellent. I really appreciate that update. I think it's helpful for people to know. I know those questions even come across my desk sometimes, and it's not clear. So the notice was really helpful, and I think sharing that now will hopefully guide people in the right direction. We're asking that, and saying it's still a best practice to try to have everything into your practitioners if the April 15th deadline were still in place. But definitely appreciate your guidance as far as what does and does not get extended as a result of that. So now I'd like to talk to you about the COBRA subsidy under the American Rescue Plan. We had a lot of questions when you were on the live stream, and we're still getting them. So can I run through some of those with you today?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have extensive guidance yet, but I'm happy to share my initial thoughts.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So the first one, and I think this is one of the biggest ones that we hear, is just how much will the government pay of the COBRA cost, and when does that start?
Well, it's going to be a full subsidy, right? The government's going to pay 100%. That's both the employer's piece and the employee's piece. Right now, it's possible for former employees to have that subsidy paid for up to 6 months. The program actually starts today, and right now it's set to expire on September 30th. Now, the rescue plan does not extend the time frame of COBRA, just who pays for it. So let's assume you were laid off on November 1st, 2019. If you count out 18 months, your benefits actually expire at the end of April this year. So that means you're only going to be eligible for a subsidy for up to 1 month. So that's why I say 6 months, right? Because it's not extending the time frame for which you're eligible for COBRA. There are other reasons as well why the subsidy may end. For example, if you become eligible for a new plan, or you become eligible, let's say, under your spouse's plan, then you're no longer going to get the subsidy. It doesn't matter whether or not you actually enroll in that other plan, just being eligible will end your, I'm saying the word eligible a lot, it will end your ability to get reimbursed through this new program.
I think that's really helpful. And you said this is for some employees. Can you talk about what employees are eligible for the subsidy? I'll say it too.
Well, first you must be eligible for COBRA. And then, well, under COBRA, there are 6 qualifying events: termination, reduction of hours, Medicare entitlement, divorce, death, and loss of dependent child. But for the subsidy, only 2 actually qualify you, and that would be termination and a reduction of hours.
Okay, so when you talk about termination, does that include all terminations, including the voluntary terminations?
No, an employee cannot decide to quit their job and qualify for the subsidy. It only applies to involuntary terminations, whether it's for job performance, a layoff, or some other reason. Just about all involuntary terminations qualify unless it's gross misconduct, like embezzlement or physical violence, then you're not going to qualify.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's helpful to know. So now what happens if the employee previously declined their COBRA or elected COBRA, but then stopped paying their premiums?
Well, basically, these employees get a second shot, a second opportunity to elect COBRA, and it can be effective as of April 1st. So they don't have to go back and catch up on old premiums. They can just start right now and get that benefit.
Oh, that's excellent. So does the subsidy apply for just medical now, or does that include vision and dental?
That's a great question, and we get it a lot. The short answer is we don't know yet. We still need guidance from Treasury and the Department of Labor. We actually reached out to the Department of Labor last week and asked that question, and they just don't have those answers yet. They're working through those details.
Okay, and I think that's helpful, and I think that's the name of the game this year, right? Like we say that all the time with retention credit and just some other things that we're just waiting for more guidance. So sit tight on that one if you've got questions coming in about it. So we've talked about employees and how they're impacted by all of this. What does this mean for employers?
That's a great question. What we know is that the subsidy is passed along to the employees through the employer in the form of a payroll tax credit. Right now, this credit's going to be refundable, and it's also going to be advanceable, which is important from a cash flow perspective. So the employers, what we do know is that they're going to need to provide a notice to the former employees, and they're going to have to allow them this special enrollment period, right? Because employees actually have to enroll to be eligible for the subsidy. So, employers should just, wait for the guidance that's going to be coming out very soon. And I would recommend they reach out to their COBRA administrator if they have any questions.
Excellent. Melissa, thank you so much for that overview. I know you had to really dive in and learn a lot about COBRA in the recent weeks as a result of this. And I think what you did today was beautiful as far as just summarizing and kind of simplifying what we really need to know at this point, and then some of the things that we're waiting on. So thank you for taking the time on that. The next thing, while I've got you, that I want to talk about is President Biden's infrastructure proposal. So, as you know, yesterday the president announced a massive infrastructure proposal that primarily focuses on roads and bridges, power infrastructure, digital infrastructure, drinking water, affordable housing, public schools, and community colleges, along with some R&D, including $50 billion for semiconductor manufacturing and research, as called for in I want to call it the CHIPS Act, but I think I should probably say the acronym CHIPS Act. It also includes $2 trillion in corporate tax increases over 15 years. So I think of all of that, the top topic on everybody's mind are those potential tax increases. Could you please start by telling us about those?
Absolutely. The part of the proposal that the president released yesterday focused on corporate tax increases, right? The main thing that we keep hearing about is he wants to increase the 21% rate up to 28%. But there are also a lot of other provisions that affect mostly multinational corporations, including a doubling of the global minimum tax that we call GILTI to 21%. And the fact he kind of changed the rules because it'd be calculated on a country by country basis. Also, he wants to eliminate the deduction for foreign derived intangible income that we refer to in the accounting world as FDII. So, there's a lot of proposals, a lot in there, as you mentioned, but with regards to taxes, the only thing we've seen so far would be the corporate tax increases. There is one other provision. It's not a tax provision, but there's a lot of interest surrounding it, so I would like to mention it. It's called the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and it was included in the proposal. And if it's enacted, it would make fundamental changes to labor laws and would also change how and who is classified as an independent contractor. So I know our clients have had a lot of interest around that particular proposal.
Absolutely, and that's super interesting to take a look for. Is this package, and will it move similarly to the recent $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that we've been talking about?
Yes and no, right? It's going to be very similar in regards to process. Given it's highly unlikely that they're going to get 10 Republicans to support the package in the Senate, Democrats are going to have to use the budget reconciliation process again to avoid having to get 60 votes in the Senate, right? However, the infrastructure package is going to be very different with regards to timing. The American Rescue Plan was, I think, relatively fast going through that entire process. And in fact, they made very few changes. If you look from where we started with the president's proposal and what was ultimately passed, it was vastly the same. I think primarily it's because they came together, they had a shared goal, the Democrats did, of getting more relief to both individuals and businesses, but they had what I call the enhanced unemployment benefits, that extra amount that came from the federal appropriations, that was set to expire on March 14th. So there wasn't a lot of time to negotiate within the party and meet that deadline. So when members of Congress had issues that were important to them, they were kind of pushed off and told, hey, we'll address those later. So everything came together and they were able to get something passed and ultimately signed by the president on March 11th. The legislative process behind this package you talked about, the infrastructure package, and we've only really seen part of it. We know that we still have another major piece that's yet to be announced. I think it's going to be different. First, the Democrats are not completely aligned. The senator from West Virginia, for example, is not comfortable with a 28% rate. He thinks 25% might be more appropriate. Second, members, they want their key issues included in the bill. Doesn't mean that they're all going to be successful, but leadership's going to have to deal with them, and that takes time. One big issue is the repeal of the $10,000 cap on salt, right? The state and local tax deduction. It was not included. And that might be a showstopper for some Democrats from states with high income tax rates like New York and New Jersey. So overall, I think this package is going to take longer. It's going to involve more negotiations. And what we see at the end of the process, I think is going to be a lot different than what's being currently introduced.
Interesting. When do you think we'll know about potential changes for pass-throughs and individuals?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there were no revenue raisers yet, tax increases on individuals or pass-throughs, but it's coming, right? The president could release something as early as this month. There's a lot of focus right now in DC surrounding the tax rates, capital gains rates, and Section 199 Cap A. The administration has actually recently clarified that his promise not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 is he's applying it per couple, not per taxpayer or not per person. So, it sounds like the marriage penalty is back. So we do have, that information out. And there have been some bills as well introduced that would vastly change the estate and gift tax rules. And we're hearing that there's a good chance that some of those provisions will in fact get included in the president's proposal. So I guess it's happening. It's going to be happening and being rolled out over the next couple of months. And I think we could see something before the end of the year.
Excellent. Melissa, this has been so helpful. Thank you for the updates. And I'd ask if we could keep you around for questions because I know they're coming in strong through the chat. So we'll bring you back after we touch base with Matthew on PPP. So Matthew, let's turn to you and ask you to start by sharing with us just the most recent PPP updates today.
Yeah, there really haven't been many updates. So it should hopefully leave some room for questions. But on March 30th, President Biden did sign the PPP Extension Act of 2021. So this act extends the program through May 31st. And it gives the SBA another month through June 30th to then approve and process those loan applications. So, now through that extension, that's been passed, and it's gonna create some headache, I think, for some of the borrowers who have shut down their process. Some of the bigger lenders are reopening their portals and reopening their programs in order to allow for specifically gross receipts calculations for Schedule C filers now to use those new applications for the Schedule C filers. On top of that, some of the smaller lenders who have to now implement a lot of these changes. We've had the CARES Act, we've had the American Recovery Plan, we've had the Economic Aid Act. We've got a ton of changes going through. And it's been a challenge for a lot of the smaller lenders in order to, implement some of these changes. So, if you are working with a small lender, you could have some challenges with them. Maybe they're temporarily closed, or maybe they're taking their time processing backlogged applications or focusing now on forgiveness applications. So those are a couple of challenges and nuances of this extension plan. I would say the best advice at this point is to really, kind of work diligently to get your application through and into that portal. I really don't think that this program is going to go all the way through May 31st. I think there's going to be some challenges getting there. Maybe the money might get exhausted or depleted before then. But that's really the biggest update as of now, with PPP.
Excellent. I think that's actually a pretty big update, even without a lot to say. That extension of time, I know, impacted a lot of people, going into the signing of it. So it's good to hear that it was approved and signed. You did mention, though, that the funding could be exhausted before that May 31st deadline. Has the SBA released any updates on the remaining available funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. The SBA has been releasing weekly updates on the loan sizing, the amount of funding that's been provided, and they've also provided some demographical, analysis. They provide analysis by industry code, but within that analysis, they talk about the size. And recently, March 28th was the last time that they released this data. Within that data, as of today, or as of the 28th, I should say, they released about 8.7 million loans. I'm trying to kind of go off the cuff here. 8.7 million loans, and it was about 734 billion in funding. Now, the program in total has about 813 billion in funding. So if we go back in time and kind of think about where that came from, as I mentioned, we had the CARES Act. As soon as the CARES Act rolled out, that was about 348 billion, and then they had to add an additional 320. Well, not all of that money was fully used, so they pulled back some there. But then under the Economic Aid Act, they then added in an additional 268 or 278 billion. So that gets us to about 806, 813 billion now, adding in the American Recovery Plan. So all those numbers, when you add it all up, the loans that were funded as of the 28th, as I mentioned, were 734 billion. Well, when you back out that 813, there's only about 79 billion left of funding. So, being an accountant, being, what we do, it's, I put together a little spreadsheet to kind of go through the weekly analysis starting from January 11th when they reopened the process for applications. And I did some calculations. And within those calculations, I noticed that the first 4 weeks of the program, the funding was going about 31 billion per week. But as of the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, it's now cut back drastically to about 14.3 billion per week. So if you kind of map that out over the next couple of weeks, this program could be set to expire or be depleted of funds by the first week in May. And now you throw in all those changes under the American Recovery Plan. You can now nonprofits now have the option to apply and qualify for PPP based on an industry code of 501c3s. You can exclude 501c4s, but pretty much any type of 501c organization can now qualify per location. So if they have employees that exceed the 300 or the 500 if they're first time borrowers, they can now qualify on a per location basis. So that opens the door for a lot of these nonprofits now to kind of jump into this process, into this pool, and really file. So things like that could create a quick exhaustion of this program and have it sunset a little bit sooner than that May 31st. So, as I mentioned before, at this point, just move forward as fast as you can. Reach out to our CLA team if you've got questions navigating the program. And, if you're not looking to file for a second draw or even a first draw, it's there's other options or opportunities out there. Back to you, Jay.
Well, yeah, Matthew, thank you so much for doing that additional research this morning. I think it's helpful when we pull questions like that together and have a thoughtful response like yours. So that was definitely right on. We did save time today and carved out specifically a chance to reach out to or allow our audience to reach out to us with more questions. So Matthew, I'm going to start with you. It looks like the top question as of right now is PPP, and it says, what are the FTE rules with PPP2? It says they use the same payroll info as PPP1, which was based on 2019. Does this mean that we need to have 2019 FTE level to get to full forgiveness?
Yeah, so for forgiveness of round two, or if you're applying for the first time under in 2021, the rules are still the same for forgiveness. So you've got two benchmark periods. You've got let me go back in time. February 15th through June 30th of 19 as one benchmark where you're going to analyze your FTEs. So you'll look at the hours worked, and you'll divide the hours worked by, average 40 hours a week. That would be a typical full-time employee. The next option is to look at your FTEs based on a January through February 2020 period. So those are the two benchmarks. So when you're looking at FTEs, you still have those same calculations that you had for first round. Nothing's really changed there. Most of the program forgiveness rules are still in place. So yeah, not too much there.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. The next question is, does the May 31st extension apply to PPP1 as well?
Yeah, it applies both first time and second time borrowers. So once again, if you're a nonprofit and you're using, on a per location basis under 300, or for your first time, up to 500, get your application in quick, because if you've got a fairly large organization, as I mentioned, that money can go very fast.
Excellent. Well, we're in kind of a unique spot that we haven't seen in quite a while with the live stream, which we've got one more question, and it looks like potentially we will be wrapping it up. We had so many Slido moderators in there that a lot has been answered. But Melissa, one for you is, do you have any indication of when individual tax increases would be effective? Would the new rates be effective in 2022? Or would they be retroactive to sometime in 2021, if you know the answer?
That's a great question, and I would say it's too early to tell. You know, we haven't even seen the specific legislative proposals yet. We do know that it is constitutional if they do want to do something retroactive. But on the other hand, we also know that the Democrats have razor thin margin in the Senate. So anything that's controversial, and this could in fact be something that moderate Democrats would not support, would tend to favor them not being retroactive. Does that mean they'll take effect in 2022, or would they be effective right there when legislation is signed? You know, too early to tell, and I think it may not be all or nothing. I think different provisions might be 2022. You might have some that are effective immediately, and you might have some that are retroactive. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Excellent. I think that's a helpful, informative answer. I'm actually going to both sit in the moderator chair as well as the presenter chair and ask myself a quick question. Somebody was asking about the retention credit and just said, you know, if tips are included for the retention credit, can you still claim the tip credit in addition, or is that considered double dipping? That would be considered double dipping. So definitely we only want to use the payroll dollars. And this is a nice reminder for everybody looking at PPP forgiveness, the ERC, you know, plan those payroll dollars, because really the best rule of thumb is you can only use one payroll dollar at a time per one program. So with that, as I said, we're rolling to the bottom of the hour, and definitely just a lot of good information today on this session. I'm so grateful to the moderators who were live with us today, handling so many of the good questions that came in. We'd like to encourage you to reach out to us with specific questions. If you'd like guidance, to definitely reach out to your advisor, and stay tuned. You know, register for future webcasts, and stay tuned for those updates as we have them, because things are definitely on the move and changing. So thank you all for your engagement. Matthew, Melissa, thank you so much, and we hope everybody stays safe and healthy until next week.
All right, take care.